I watched from the shadows as the 4,000-watt stage lights hit the white silk dress, cooking the chemical thread I had secretly used to sew the seams. The crowd gasped as the bodice of her masterpiece disintegrated instantly, sliding off her body and leaving her standing in her industrial Spanx in front of the entire fashion world. She thought I was a senile old man she could lock in a basement to do her work. She forgot I was a master tailor, and I know exactly how to make a dress fall apart. Before I show you the moment her career ended, hit subscribe. This is the story of the Phoenix Collection.
The bass didn't just play, it punched. It was a rhythmic, synthetic thud that rattled the rivets of my wheelchair and vibrated through the hollow bones of my hips. I sat in the shadows of the VIP section, which in this derelict repurposed warehouse in Brooklyn simply meant a slightly elevated platform roped off with red velvet that smelled faintly of mildew. Around me, the elite of the fashion world, or at least the people who desperately wanted to be perceived as the elite, preened and postured. They were a sea of Botox, Ozempic-starved jawlines and rented tuxedos, all straining to see the runway. They weren't here for me. To them, I was set dressing, a prop, the beloved grandfather dragged out of storage to humanize the ice-cold brand of Bella Vane. I adjusted my glasses, the wire frames biting into the bridge of my nose. My hands rested in my lap, covered by a tartan blanket. Underneath the wool, my fingers were twisted claws, swollen knots of arthritis and repetitive strain injury. They throbbed in time with the techno-trash music. Every pulse of pain was a reminder of the last 3 months. Every ache was a receipt for the bill I was about to collect. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed, distorted by too much reverb. "The moment you have been waiting for. The resurrection of style. The Phoenix Collection." The lights cut out. Total darkness. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room. Then the spotlights hit.
They weren't normal stage lights. These were industrial-grade halogens rigged specifically at my granddaughter's request. She wanted the brilliance of the sun. She wanted to shine so bright that no one could see the cracks in her foundation. I squinted against the glare. The heat was instant. I could feel it radiating from 40 feet away. It was a dry, aggressive heat, like opening an oven door to check a roast. Perfect. The music shifted. A high-pitched, ethereal wailing started. Bella stepped out from behind the black curtain. For a second, just a fraction of a heartbeat, I felt a pang of professional pride, not for her, but for the garment, the Phoenix gown. It was a masterpiece of structural engineering, pure white heavyweight silk, cut on the bias to drape like liquid mercury, yet fitted so tightly through the bodice it acted as a second skin. It had a sweetheart neckline that plunged dangerously low, held together by sheer will and invisible stitching. The skirt was an architectural wonder, a cascade of pleats that moved with her, expanding and contracting like the wings of a bird in flight. I knew every thread of that dress. I knew the tensile strength of the silk. I knew the exact friction coefficient of the lining against her skin. I knew it because I had spent the last 14 nights hunched over a sewing machine in a damp basement, bleeding onto the fabric, while Bella screamed at me through a baby monitor. She walked. The Bella strut. Left hip, right hip, chin up, eyes dead. She looked like a goddess of war. The cameras went manic. Flash, 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 flash. A strobe light effect that froze her movement in jagged bursts. "She's magnificent," a woman next to me whispered. She was wearing a hat that looked like a dead crow. "Look at that fit. It's painted on." "It's tight," I mumbled, my voice barely audible over the bass. "What?" the woman asked, not looking at me. "I said the fit is precise," I corrected myself. Bella was halfway down the runway now. She was eating it up. She paused to blow a kiss to a cluster of influencers holding up their phones, live streaming her glory to the world. She smirked. It was that specific smirk she used when she stole my pension checks, the one that said, "I can do anything and you can't stop me."
I looked past her, to the front row.
Sitting directly center, legs crossed, was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. Mr. Volkov. He wasn't filming. He wasn't smiling. He was staring at Bella with the dead-eyed intensity of a shark watching a seal. Next to him sat two men who looked less like fashion critics and more like the reason you lock your doors at night. Bella owed Volkov $500,000. This show wasn't just a vanity project, it was a desperate plea for her life. If the investors bought the collection, she lived. If the collection failed, well, Volkov had a reputation for liquidity, and not the financial kind. Bella reached the end of the catwalk. This was the zone. She stopped directly under the main lighting array. 4,000 watts of focused illumination poured down onto her. I checked my watch, an old analog Timex. The second hand swept past the 12:1. The temperature on that specific square of the runway would be pushing 45 degrees Celsius by now. Bella struck her pose, hands on hips, chest thrust out, back arched. She was putting maximum strain on the bodice seams. She wanted to show the world she was fearless. 2. I watched the fabric. To the untrained eye, it was still perfect, but I saw what they couldn't. I had stitched the critical stress points of the bodice, the side seams and the zipper reinforcement, with a very special spool of thread, a vintage theatrical supply from my days costuming magicians in Vegas. It was designed for quick change acts. It was chemically treated to maintain integrity at room temperature, but to rapidly degrade when exposed to high-intensity UV and heat simultaneously. It was a time-delayed fuse made of cotton and polymer. 3. Bella pivoted. She was basking in the applause. She threw her head back, exposing her throat, looking like a queen accepting her coronation. The heat was cooking the chemical bonds in the thread. I imagined the microscopic fibers screaming as they dissolved, turning from steel cables into wet toilet paper. The crowd roared. They loved her. They loved the dress. They were witnessing the birth of a fashion icon. I took a slow, deep breath. 4. It started with a sound that only I heard, or perhaps I just felt it. Pop. It was the sound of the primary anchor stitch on the left side of the bodice giving up the ghost. Bella flinched. Just a tiny twitch of her left eye. She felt it, the sudden release of tension, the sudden lack of support. She looked down, confusion clouding her perfectly contoured face. She reached a hand up to her ribcage, thinking perhaps a hook had slipped. Pop, pop, rip. The sound was undeniable now. It sounded like a zipper being yanked down violently, but there was no zipper moving. It was the sound of the side seam disintegrating completely. The structure of the dress failed. The heavy white silk, no longer anchored to her torso, obeyed the laws of gravity. It didn't just slide, it peeled away. The bodice flapped open like a book spine breaking. The skirt, heavy with layers of fabric, dragged the top down with it. Bella gasped, her hands flying to her chest, but she was too slow. The dress pooled instantly around her ankles. The music seemed to cut out, though I know it didn't. The silence was in the room's reaction. There she stood, the queen of Fashion Week, the icon. She was wearing a pair of beige industrial-strength Spanx that went from her knees to her navel, and two strategically placed silicone nipple covers that looked like pepperoni slices. She stood there, shivering in the heat of the lights, stripped of her armor, stripped of her dignity, exposed to the world as exactly what she was, a fraud wrapped in expensive packaging. A camera flashed, then another, then 100. The woman with the crow hat gasped, "Oh my God, is this performance art?" I looked at Bella. Her eyes met mine across the dark void of the audience. She looked terrified. She looked at me, and for the first time in years, she really saw me. She saw the old man she had starved. She saw the tailor she had enslaved. I raised my glass of water, tap water, lukewarm, in a silent toast. Checkmate. The slide from respected elder to prisoner didn't happen all at once. It happened in inches, then miles. It started at the cemetery. The dirt on Martha's grave wasn't even settled. The grass hadn't begun to grow. I was standing there, staring at the headstone, feeling like half of my own body had been amputated.
50 years of marriage. 50 years of waking up next to the same woman, drinking coffee from the same chipped mugs, sharing the same silence. Now, the silence was just mine. My son, David, put a hand on my shoulder. His grip was weak, clammy. David has always been a man who apologizes for his own existence. He inherited my height, but none of my spine. "Dad," he said, his voice trembling a little, "you can't go back to that empty house. It's too big, too quiet." "I like the quiet," I said, not looking away from Martha's name. "Bella is worried about you," he pressed. "She wants you to come live with us, just for a while. We have the space, a whole guest suite." I hesitated. The thought of my empty house with Martha's knitting still on the side table and her smell fading from the pillows was terrifying. I was 78 years old. My joints burned when it rained. Maybe it was time to let family take over. Maybe it was time to rest. "A guest suite?" I asked. "Huge," David promised. "Private bathroom, garden view. Bella insists. She says she wants to get to know her grandfather." That should have been the first red flag. Bella hadn't visited us in 6 years. The last time I saw her, she was asking for money to start a lifestyle brand that involved selling repackaged Alibaba lip gloss. But grief makes you stupid. It makes you want to believe that you still matter. "Okay," I said. "I'll pack a bag." 2 days later, I pulled up to their house in my 1985 Mercedes SL. I loved that car. It was the last thing I bought when my tailoring business was at its peak. It was pristine. The house was a monstrosity in the suburbs, one of those modern farmhouse builds that looks like a Chipotle from the outside. White siding, black trim, zero character. Bella was waiting in the driveway. She wasn't looking at me, she was looking at her phone. She was holding it up at a high angle, talking to the screen with a manic, terrifying enthusiasm. "Hey guys, big news today. My pop-pop is moving in. Hashtag family first, hashtag generational love." She panned the phone to me as I stepped out of the car. I stiffened, my back aching. "Say hi to the fam, Pop-Pop," she chirped. "Hello," I grunted. She immediately cut the recording. Her smile dropped like a stone. "Okay, cut. David, get his bags. And move that car. It's leaking oil on my pavers." "It doesn't leak," I said, bristling. "I rebuilt the engine myself." "Whatever," she said, already typing a caption. "Just don't park it out front. It ruins the aesthetic." I followed David inside. The house smelled like vanilla chemicals in desperation. The furniture was all white. White couches, white rugs, white drapes. It looked like a mental asylum designed by IKEA. There were no books, no photos of family, just framed prints of abstract shapes and a massive ring light set up in the living room. "So," I said, clutching my suitcase, "the guest suite?" David wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked at the floor, then at the kitchen island, then at his shoes. "About that, Dad. We're doing some renovations on the second floor. Drywall dust, allergies, you know. So where am I sleeping?" He pointed to a door off the kitchen. "The lower level, just until the work is done." He opened the door. The smell hit me first. Mildew, damp earth, unwashed laundry. I walked down the wooden stairs. They creaked. It wasn't a finished basement. It was a storage cellar. The walls were cinder block, painted a peeling gray. There were no windows, just a small rectangular vent near the ceiling that let in a sliver of light from the backyard dirt. Piled high against the walls were boxes marked returns and unsold stock, toppling towers of cardboard. In the center of the room, cleared out from the junk, was a metal folding cot, a thin mattress, a sleeping bag. "David," I said, my voice low, "what is this?" "It's temporary," he said quickly, sweating now. "Money is just tight right now, Dad. Bella's brand is about to take off, really, but we had to rent out the spare rooms to some traveling nurses to cover the mortgage. This is all we have." I looked at the cot. Then I looked at my son. "I have a 4-bedroom house, David. I have a pension. I don't need to live in a dungeon." "You can't go back," Bella's voice came from the top of the stairs. She clicked down in her heels, holding a latte. "You signed the lease over to the agency yesterday, remember?" I froze. "I did what?" "The rental agency," she said, taking a sip. "Dad took the papers to you at the funeral home. You signed them.
Tenants move in Monday, 2-year lease, ironclad. I looked at David. He looked like he wanted to vomit. I thought those were insurance papers, I whispered. My hand shook. I remembered signing a stack of documents David had handed me while I was crying over Martha's casket. I hadn't read them. I trusted him. "You tricked me," I said. The shock was turning into a cold, hard knot in my stomach. "We're helping you," Bella snapped. "You can't live alone. You're old. You forget things." "I forget nothing," I said. I grabbed the handle of my suitcase. "I'm leaving. I'll stay at a hotel." I started up the stairs. Bella didn't move. She blocked the doorway. She was small, but she had the vicious confidence of someone who has never been punched in the mouth. "Give me your keys, Arthur," she said. Not Pop-Pop anymore. "Get out of my way." "David," she commanded, "get his keys and his wallet." "Bella, maybe we shouldn't," David started. "He's senile, David," she shouted. "Look at him. He's confused. He thinks he's going to a hotel. He'll wander into traffic. If you let him leave and he gets hurt, that's on you. That's negligence. Do you want to go to jail?" David looked at me. I saw the calculation in his eyes. He was afraid of her. He was afraid of the debt. He was afraid of the world. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered. He reached out and grabbed my wrist. "I'm 78, but I've worked with heavy fabrics and industrial shears my whole life. I have grip strength." I shoved him back. "Don't touch me." "Grab him!" Bella screamed. David lunged. We grappled on the stairs. It was pathetic. A middle-aged man wrestling his grieving father. I stumbled. My knee hit the concrete step. Pain shot up my leg like a lightning bolt. David ripped the keys from my pocket. He took my wallet. I lay on the stairs, gasping for breath, clutching my knee. Bella stood over me. She held up my keys, the keys to my Mercedes, the keys to my house that was no longer mine. "This is for your own good," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "You're not well, Arthur. We all see it. You're aggressive. You're confused. If you try to leave again, I'll call Adult Protective Services. I know a social worker. I'll tell them you attacked me. I'll tell them you're a danger to yourself." She leaned in close. I could smell the vanilla vape juice on her breath. "They won't put you in a nice hotel," she whispered. "They'll put you in state care, the kind of place where the orderlies steal your teeth and tie you to the bed frame so you don't wander. Is that what you want?" I looked up at her. I looked at David, who was weeping silently in the corner, holding my wallet like a thief. I realized then that Martha was the only thing that had kept this family human. With her gone, they were just wolves. "No," I said quietly, "that's not what I want." "Good," Bella smiled. It was a terrifying expression. "Welcome home, Pop-Pop. Now unpack. I need you to hem these pants. I have a shoot in an hour." She turned and walked up the stairs, the click-clack of her heels echoing like gunshots. David left the basement door open, but he took the keys. I sat on the cot in the damp dark. I didn't cry. I had cried enough at the funeral. I reached into my pocket. They had taken my wallet and my car keys, but they hadn't checked my vest pocket. I pulled out my thimble. It was silver, dented from 50 years of pushing needles through wool and leather. It was cold and hard. I put it on my finger. It fit perfectly. I wasn't a guest. I was a prisoner in a sweatshop run by a girl who thought hard work was finding the right filter. They thought I was trapped. They thought I was weak. They forgot one thing. A tailor knows how to take things apart, and I was going to dismantle their lives, stitch by stitch. The basement air was thick enough to chew. It was a cocktail of mold spores, wet cardboard, and the metallic tang of the rusted furnace in the corner. I sat on the edge of the cot, shivering under the thin blanket. My jacket, a charcoal tweed I'd cut myself in 1998, had lost a button during the scuffle with David on the stairs. To anyone else, a missing button is a nuisance. To me, it is a structural failure. It creates an imbalance in the drape. It offends the eye. I didn't have my sewing kit.
David had confiscated my sharps along with my dignity, but I had found a small travel sewing kit in one of the return boxes Bella had dumped down here. Cheap polyester thread, a needle that felt like a crowbar. My hands were stiff. The dampness of the basement was settling into the joints, making my knuckles swell like soaked wood. I rubbed them together, feeling the grind of bone on bone. Focus, I told myself. You are not a geriatric patient. You are a master tailor. I threaded the needle on the third try. I positioned the button, horn, 4-hole, and began. Down, up, loop, knot, tension. The pain was there, a dull throb in the base of my thumb, but the muscle memory was stronger. My hands knew the rhythm. For 50 years, these hands had clothed bankers, politicians, and princes. They didn't need my brain to tell them how to create a shank for a button. They just moved. The door at the top of the stairs banged open.
I didn't stop. I was finishing the wrap, the thread coiling tight around the base of the button to give it space to clear the buttonhole. Bella came down the stairs. She was holding a box of vegan leather handbags that smelled like burning tires. "David says you're not eating," she said, her tone bored. She dropped the box on the floor with a heavy thud. "Stop being dramatic. It's turkey meatloaf." She turned to leave, but then she stopped. She had seen my hands moving. "What are you doing?" I tied off the thread and bit the end. A clean break. I buttoned the jacket. The pattern matched perfectly across the placket. "Maintenance," I said. She frowned. She walked over, her heels clicking on the concrete. She reached out and grabbed my lapel, yanking me forward. I winced as my neck snapped back, but she didn't notice. She was staring at the button. Then she looked at the cuff, where I had repaired a fraying seam an hour earlier. "Who did this?" she asked. "I did." "You?" She looked at my hands, the swollen knuckles, the liver spots. "You can't even hold a fork without shaking." "I don't need to hold a fork to survive. I need to hold a needle." She narrowed her eyes. She let go of my jacket and looked around the room. Her gaze landed on my old steamer trunk in the corner. It was the only piece of furniture I had been allowed to keep, mostly because it was too heavy for David to carry back up the stairs. "What's in there?" "Personal effects. Memories." "Open it." "No." She laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound. "This isn't a negotiation, Arthur. You live in my house. You eat my food. Everything under this roof is mine." She walked over to the trunk and kicked the latch. It didn't budge. She looked around, grabbed a flathead screwdriver from a tool bench David had abandoned down here, and jammed it into the lock. "Bella, don't," I warned, standing up. My knees popped. She ignored me. She torqued the screwdriver. The brass lock, weakened by age, snapped. She threw the lid back. Inside wasn't just clothes. It was my archive, my life's work. On top lay the portfolio, a leather-bound book containing the providence of my career. She flipped it open. Me, standing outside the shop on Savile Row, 1974. I was young, wearing a 3-piece suit that fit like armor. The sign above me read A. Blackwood & Sons. Bella flipped the page. Me, measuring a man in a pinstripe suit. "Who is this guy?" she asked, pointing a manicured nail at the photo. "The Duke of Kent," I said, 1978. He needed a mourning coat for the Jubilee. She stopped flipping. She looked at the photo, then at me, then back at the photo. You made clothes for royalty?" "I made clothes for gentlemen," I corrected. "Some of them happened to be royalty." She flipped more pages. Photos of bespoke gowns, hand-stitched lapels, intricate embroidery. Reviews from GQ and Tatler from the 80s, calling me a technician of the highest order. She wasn't looking at the artistry. She wasn't admiring the silhouette or the drape. I could see the gears turning behind her eyes. She was looking at the value. "Do you have any idea what heritage branding is worth right now?" she murmured. She looked up at me. The disgust that usually filled her eyes was gone, replaced by a terrifying, predatory hunger. "You can still do this? The sewing? The whatever this is? It's tailoring. And yes, but I am retired." "Retired," she scoffed. She closed the portfolio and tucked it under her arm. "You're not retired. You're underutilized." She looked at the rack of clothes in the corner. Her samples, cheap, fast-fashion garbage imported from Guangzhou, polyester blends that fell apart if you looked at them wrong. She had been trying to launch a luxury line for months, but the quality was laughable. She was charging $500 for dresses that cost $4 to make, and the customers were noticing. She looked back at me. "David said you were broke, that you just had the pension." "I have my skills," I said. "Yeah," she smiled, a slow, shark-like smile. "You do." She didn't say another word. She took the portfolio and walked up the stairs. I sat back down on the cot. I felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the basement draft. I had just shown the wolf that I was made of meat. The next morning, I woke up to shouting upstairs. I walked to the vent, a small metal grate near the ceiling that fed into the living room floor. It was my ear to the world. "You can't just fire us, Bella. We have a contract." A woman's voice, young, desperate. "Clause 4, Section B," Bella's voice replied, cold, dismissive. "Termination for restructuring. Read the fine print, honey. Here's your check for the week. Get out." "But Fashion Week is in 3 months. Who is going to sew the collection?" "I found a new production lead," Bella said. "Someone with European experience. Savile Row, very exclusive." "Who? You can't afford anyone from the Row." "He's in-house," Bella said. "Literally." I heard the front door slam, then another slam, then silence. She had fired her seamstresses. 3 young women she had been underpaying were now unemployed. A few minutes later, the basement door opened. David came down. He was carrying a heavy box, a sewing machine. Not my vintage Singer, not my Juki Industrial. This was a plastic, computerized domestic machine, a toy. He set it on the wobbly card table. He looked sick. "Bella wants you to start on the prototypes," he mumbled. She left the patterns on the table. "David," I said, "I am 78 years old. I have arthritis. I cannot work a sweatshop schedule." She says it's good for your mind," David lied, "to keep you active, cognitive therapy." He turned to leave. "David," I called out. He stopped at the stairs. "She took the portfolio, didn't she?" He nodded. "She's scanning the photos. For the website. She's rebranding the collection. Vane and Blackwood, Heritage Couture. She's using my name? She says it's family property." He went up the stairs. He closed the door. Then I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. Clack! The sound of a power drill. I ran to the door. I tried the handle. Locked. "David!" I pounded on the wood. "David!" The drilling continued. She wasn't just locking the handle. She was installing a deadbolt, an exterior-grade deadbolt mounted on the outside. "David, open this door!" The drilling stopped. "It's for your safety, Pop-Pop." Bella's voice came through the wood, muffled but cheerful. "We can't have you wandering off while you're working. You need to focus. The deadline is tight." "This is illegal," I shouted. "This is false imprisonment." "It's a secured memory care unit," she laughed. "Get to work, Arthur. The white silk is for the bias cut. Don't waste it. It's expensive." I heard her footsteps walk away. I slumped against the door. I looked at the plastic sewing machine. I looked at the stack of patterns. She didn't see a grandfather. She didn't even see a human being. She saw a machine that ran on oatmeal and fear. I walked over to the table. I picked up the fabric shears. They were dull, cheap scissors. I looked at the patterns. They were amateurish, poorly graded. The armholes were too tight. The rise was too short. I could fix them. I could make them perfect. But why would I? I sat down at the machine. I touched the plastic wheel. Because if I don't, I realized, I will die in this room. She wanted a tailor? Fine. She was going to get the best tailor in the world. And I was going to sew a tragedy so tight she wouldn't be able to breathe in it. Time became a blur of gray concrete and white fabric. There was no day or night in the basement, only the buzzing of the fluorescent strip light David had installed on a timer. Click. 6 a.m. The light hummed to life, flickering a sickly yellow before settling into a harsh glare. I woke up on the cot, my body shaped like a question mark. My hands were the first thing to register consciousness. They didn't feel like hands anymore. They felt like bags of crushed glass. The knuckles were swollen to twice their normal size, the skin shiny and red. I tried to make a fist.
I couldn't. The fingers curled halfway and then hit a wall of calcified agony. "Wakey, wakey, eggs and bakey," Bella's voice chirped through the baby monitor sitting on the workbench. "Except we're out of eggs, and bacon is bad for your cholesterol. There's oatmeal at the bottom of the stairs." I rolled off the cot. My knees popped like pistol shots. I limped to the stairs. A plastic bowl sat on the bottom step. Cold oatmeal. No sugar. A mug of instant coffee that tasted like battery acid. I ate it standing up. I needed the fuel. The machine was waiting. The schedule was a mathematical impossibility. Bella had promised 24 looks for the runway, 24 complex couture-level garments. In a professional atelier, this would take a team of 10 skilled seamstresses 3 months. She had one 78-year-old man, a plastic sewing machine, and 3 weeks. I sat at the machine. The plastic casing vibrated violently at high speeds, sending shockwaves up my arms and into my shoulders. It was a toy, not a tool. It struggled to punch through the layers of heavy wool and structural interfacing. Zzz, zzz, zzz. The sound drilled into my skull. By noon, I was working on the structural boning for a corset. It required hand-stitching the channels. I had to push the needle through 4 layers of coutil fabric. My thumb gave out. The muscle simply stopped responding. The needle slipped and buried itself a 1/4 inch into my index finger. I didn't yell. I just stared at the drop of dark red blood welling up on the tip of the needle. I grabbed a scrap of muslin to staunch the bleeding. I couldn't bleed on the fabric. Blood doesn't wash out of silk. It stains it forever. The basement door opened. Bella descended, smelling of expensive perfume and ozone. She was wearing a tracksuit that cost more than my first car. "Why is the machine silent?" she asked, not looking at me but checking the rack of finished garments. "My hand," I said, holding up the bandaged finger. "I need a break, just an hour. The inflammation is—" "An hour?" She turned on me, her eyes wide with mock incredulity. "Arthur, do you know how much money I'm losing every minute you sit there feeling sorry for yourself? The investors are coming for a preview on Friday." "I can't hold the needle, Bella." She walked over to the workbench. She picked up the seam ripper. She tapped it against her palm. "It's January, Arthur. Did you know that?" I said nothing. "It's supposed to drop to 10 below zero tonight," she continued casually. "The garage, it's not insulated. The wind just whistles right through the aluminum door. It would be very uncomfortable for an old man with thin blood." I stared at her. "You wouldn't try me," she smiled. It was a dead smile. "David is at work. He won't be home until 8. If this corset isn't finished by the time he walks through that door, you're sleeping next to the lawnmower, and I won't give you a blanket." She leaned in. "Do we understand the incentives?" I looked at my swollen hands. I looked at the cold, unforgiving eyes of my granddaughter. "I understand," I rasped. "Good. Wrap it up. Literally." She turned to leave, but stopped. "Oh, and clean yourself up. I'm filming content in 20 minutes. I need the background noise to sound authentic, but I don't want you coughing. It ruins the audio." She went upstairs. I unwrapped my finger. The bleeding had stopped. I picked up the needle. I found a way to wedge the eye of the needle against the thimble so I could push with my palm instead of my thumb. It was awkward, and it hurt my wrist, but it worked. 20 minutes later, the door opened again. Bella came down with a tripod, a ring light, and a fresh face of makeup. She set up the camera in the corner of the basement that looked industrial chic, the brick wall. She avoided pointing the lens at my cot or the bucket I used when they forgot to unlock the bathroom door. She sat on a high stool, positioning herself so the light hit her cheekbones. She held a sketch pad. Action in 3, 2, her face transformed. The scowl vanished. A bright, bubbly, inspiring mask slid into place. "Hey guys, welcome back to the studio. I am absolutely grinding today. Fashion Week is around the corner, and I am literally pouring my soul into this collection." She picked up a charcoal pencil and made meaningless scribbles on the paper. She held the pencil like a toddler holds a crayon. She had no idea how to draw. "It's so important to be hands-on," she told her followers. "I don't just design, I build. Every stitch tells a story." In the shadows, 10 feet away, out of frame, I fed a length of silk organza under the presser foot. Zzzt. Hear that? She whispered to the camera, gesturing vaguely behind her. That is the sound of dedication. We are running the machines hot today. I bit the inside of my cheek. We.
She glanced at the phone screen, reading the live comments. "Aw, thanks, Fashion Lover 99. She says, Bella, your work ethic is insane. You're an inspiration." Bella pressed a hand to her chest, looking humble. "Thank you, guys. Honestly, it's hard. People think fashion is just glamour, but it's blood, sweat, and tears. I haven't slept in days." She had slept until 10 a.m. I heard her snoring through the vent. "Can we see the process?" she read out. Well, right now, the atelier is a bit of a mess. Creative chaos, you know. But here." She stood up and walked over to the rack. She pulled out a velvet evening jacket I had finished at 2 a.m. the previous night. I had hand pad-stitched the lapels to ensure they rolled perfectly. It was a technique that took 40 years to master. She held it up to the camera, bunching the fabric in her fist, ruining the drape. "Look at this structure," she bragged. "I stayed up all night sculpting this shoulder line. I really wanted to channel that 1940s power silhouette." "Show us the stitching," a comment popped up. She brought the camera close to the lapel. "Tiny stitches," she said. "Hand done by me." I stopped sewing. The machine went silent. She turned her head, her eyes flashing a warning at me in the dark. "Don't stop the noise." I pressed the pedal. Zzz, zzz. "Wow, everyone is blowing up the chat," she laughed. "Queen of the Needle, I love that. Maybe that's the name of the memoir, huh?" She streamed for an hour. She took credit for the French seams. She took credit for the pattern drafting. She took credit for the blood on my finger, claiming she pricked herself, suffering for the art. When she finally clicked end stream, the mask fell off instantly. "Okay, engagement is up 20%, she muttered, checking the analytics. She looked at me. I was hunched over the machine, my back screaming in protest. "You're too slow," she said. "I need the silk trousers done by dinner, and don't bunch the thread this time." She packed up her ring light and left. I sat there in the gloom. I looked at the Queen of the Needle trending on her feed. I looked at the jacket she had claimed as hers. She was stealing my life. She was stealing my name. But she didn't understand the nature of the work. She thought sewing was just putting pieces of cloth together. She didn't know that a garment is a complex system of tensions. If you pull one thread too tight, the whole thing buckles. If you weaken one seam, the whole thing collapses. I picked up the silk for the trousers. "Fine," I whispered to the empty room. "You want the credit? You can have the credit." I reached for the bobbin case. I adjusted the tension screw, just a quarter turn to the left. Loose, unstable. It would hold for a runway walk. It would hold for a photo. But if she sat down, if she bent over, I threaded the machine. Zzzt. Let them praise her work ethic. I was about to engineer her downfall. It was Friday evening, the preview Bella had threatened me about. I had been working for 14 hours straight. The air in the basement was stale, recycled through the furnace filter that hadn't been changed since the Carter administration. My lips were cracked. My throat felt like I had swallowed a handful of dry sand. I heard the doorbell ring upstairs, then the click-clack of heels on hardwood, squeals of delight, the pop of a cork. "Oh my God, Bella, the house looks amazing." "Thanks, babe. It's a vibe, right? Minimalist luxe." I kept sewing. I was working on a chiffon overlay, a delicate fabric that required the touch of a surgeon. My hands were steady only because I was concentrating so hard that the rest of the world ceased to exist. Then the basement door opened. "And down here," Bella's voice floated down, "is where the magic happens, the atelier." She descended the stairs, followed by 3 women. They were carbon copies of her. Glossy hair, expensive dental veneers, and outfits that looked like they were designed by an algorithm. They held flutes of champagne that fizzed with golden bubbles. I smelled the wine. My mouth watered involuntarily. I hadn't had water since lunch. My empty glass sat on the workbench, a dry ring of dust at the bottom. "Oh, wow," one of the women said, looking around the dank basement with wrinkled nose. "It's gritty, very underground.
It's about the process, Bella said, waving a hand dismissively at the mold stains on the wall. I need to be disconnected from the world to create. And who's this? Another woman pointed at me with a manicured nail. She was wearing a blazer that cost more than my annual pension. I didn't look up. I couldn't. If I looked up, I might lose the line of the seam. That's Arthur, Bella said. Her voice took on that sugary, patronizing tone she used for the camera. My grandfather. He lives with us now. He gets confused. He likes to help out. It keeps his hands busy. Aw, the women cooed in unison. That is so sweet of you, Bella, taking care of him. It's a lot of work, Bella sighed, acting the martyr, but family is family. She walked over to my station. The women followed, surrounding me like a flock of perfumed vultures. Hey, Pop-Pop, Bella said loudly, as if I were deaf. Say hi to the girls. I stopped the machine. I looked up. My eyes were dry and burning. Hello, my voice cracked. Oh, he sounds thirsty, one of the friends said. Should we get him some water?
Bella laughed. He has water right there. She pointed to the empty glass. He forgets to drink, don't you, Arthur? She leaned against the table, her hip bumping the machine. Look at him, she said, gesturing to me like I was an exhibit at a zoo. Hunched over like a little garden gnome. He loves it, don't you, Arthur? Loves feeling useful. The women giggled. He is kinda cute, like one of those elves in Harry Potter. Dobby? Totally a Dobby, Bella agreed. She held up her champagne flute. The liquid caught the light of the fluorescent bulb. It looked cold, crisp. Here, Pop-Pop, she said. Want a sip? Celebrate the collection? I looked at the glass. My pride told me to refuse. My thirst told me to beg. I reached out a trembling hand. Please, I whispered. Bella smiled. She tipped the glass. But she didn't tip it toward my hand. She tipped it over the bucket of fabric scraps I kept by my feet, strips of silk, velvet, and lace that were too small to use but too precious to throw away. The champagne splashed into the bucket. It soaked the silk scraps. It smelled of yeast and money. Oops, Bella gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in mock surprise. So clumsy. My bad.
The friends shrieked with laughter. Bella, you wasted the veuve. Don't worry, Bella smirked, looking down at me. He didn't need it anyway. Alcohol interacts with his meds, right, elf? She patted me on the head, a sharp, rhythmic patting, like you would pet a dog you didn't particularly like. Keep sewing, she commanded, her voice dropping the sweetness instantly. That hem won't finish itself. They turned and walked back toward the stairs, their laughter echoing off the concrete walls. He's so weird, I heard one of them whisper. I know, Bella replied, but hey, free labor is free labor. The door closed. I sat there. I looked at the empty glass. I looked at the bucket of wine-soaked rags. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It wasn't a scream. It was a silent internal fracture, like a support beam giving way deep inside a building. The shaking in my hands stopped. The pain in my joints seemed to fade into the background, replaced by a cold, numbing clarity.
They didn't see a person. They saw a resource. They saw a slave. And slaves, historically, have only one recourse when their masters push them too far: revolt. I reached for the needle. It was a sharp, size 11 needle. I held it up to the light. It was small, insignificant, but in the right hands it could pierce the toughest leather. It could bind. It could sever. I wasn't just going to ruin the dress. I wasn't just going to ruin the show. I was going to destroy her. I was going to strip her of everything: her reputation, her money, her future. I was going to leave her as naked and vulnerable as she had left me in this basement. I took a deep breath. I picked up the chiffon. Sew, I told myself. Sew like the devil is watching. Because he was. And he was about to get a front row seat. It was 2 a.m. The house was usually silent at this hour, save for the settling of the foundation and the hum of the basement freezer. But tonight, the floorboards above me groaned. Heavy footsteps. Not David's shuffling gait, and not Bella's staccato heel strikes. These were boots. Heavy, deliberate, confident boots. I was lying on my cot, staring at the ceiling. I hadn't slept.
The adrenaline from the champagne incident was still coursing through my veins, a cold fire that kept my mind sharp. I rolled quietly off the mattress. My joints popped, but the sound was swallowed by the noise upstairs. I moved to the corner of the room, to the plastic crate I used as a step stool. I climbed up until my face was inches from the vent grate. The vent opened out under the living room sofa. It was a perfect acoustic funnel. "Please, sit," Bella's voice. It wasn't the confident influencer voice. It was high, tight, vibrating with anxiety. "I am not here for refreshments, Bella. I am here for the update." Silence. I could hear the rustle of fabric. Bella fidgeting. "The collection it's incredible, Mr. Volkov. Truly. The engagement numbers are through the roof. We have RSVPs from Vogue, Harper's, the buyers from Bergdorf." "I do not care about likes, Bella. I care about liquidity." "It's going to sell," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "The projection is 3 million in the first quarter. Once the show happens, the orders will flood in. I just need until the show." "You have borrowed $500,000, Volkov said. His voice didn't rise. It remained flat, terrifyingly calm. "You told me you had a manufacturing partner in Italy. You told me you had a distribution deal signed." "I do. Well, I'm finalizing it. But the production, I brought it in-house to ensure quality control." "In-house?" Volkov let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "You mean the basement? I saw the old man in the video, the one you hide in the shadows." My breath hitched. He had seen me. He's a master tailor," Bella argued desperately. "He's a genius. The quality is better than Italy." "You are gambling with my money on the arthritis of a geriatric," Volkov said. I heard the sound of leather creaking. He was leaning in. "The venue is booked. The lighting, the catering, the models, the money is gone, Bella. It's an investment." "It is a hole," Volkov corrected, "and you are standing at the edge of it." There was a pause, a long, heavy silence that pressed down through the floorboards. "Friday," Volkov said. "The show is Friday." "Yes, Friday night. It's going to be a triumph." "If it is a triumph," Volkov said, "then you pay me my principal plus the 30% interest on Saturday morning, by wire." "Saturday? Funds take time to clear." "Saturday," he repeated. "If the show flops, if the buyers do not buy, if I do not see my money, you'll get it, I swear." "If I do not," Volkov lowered his voice. It became a soft rumble, intimate and deadly. "I do not take payment plans. I do not take excuses. I take collateral." "I have the house. David put the deed up." "The house is leveraged to the hilt. It is worthless," Volkov scoffed. "No, I take personal collateral." I heard a soft slap-slap. He was patting her cheek. "You are a pretty girl, Bella. Your face is your fortune, yes? That is what you sell on the internet?" "Don't touch me," she whispered, terrified. "If I lose $500,000, Volkov said, "I will make sure you never sell anything with that face again. Do you understand?" "Yes," she sobbed. "Yes, I understand." "Good. Make it a good show, for your sake."
The heavy boots walked to the door. The front door opened and slammed shut with a force that shook dust from the basement ceiling beams. I heard Bella gasp for air. She was hyperventilating. "David!" she screamed. "David, get down here!" Running footsteps. "What? Is he gone?" David's voice, weak, trembling. "He threatened me! He threatened my face! You have to do something!" "What can I do, Bella? It's Volkov. I told you not to go to the loan sharks. I told you the bank said no for a reason." "Shut up! Just shut up and pour me a drink." I climbed down from the crate. I sat on my cot in the dark. The situation had changed.
This wasn't just about humiliation anymore. This was life or death. If Bella failed, Volkov wouldn't sue her. He would hurt her. And David, my spineless son, had put the deed to the house up? Even if it was leveraged, he was risking homelessness. I looked at my hands. Bella was cornered. She was terrified. And terrified people make mistakes. They rush, they cut corners, they don't check the details. They don't check the thread. A grim smile touched my lips. Volkov wanted a show. I would give him a show. I would make sure the Phoenix collection didn't just flop. I would make sure it burned to the ground. I lay back on the pillow. For the first time in weeks, I fell asleep instantly. I had a plan. And now, I had a deadline. Pain is a specific kind of noise. It starts as a hum, a background static that you can ignore if you turn the volume of your thoughts up loud enough. But then, as the days grind on and the dampness of the basement seeps into the marrow, the hum turns into a scream. By the time we were 2 weeks out from Fashion Week, my body was screaming. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesday was the day David usually brought down the leftovers, the congealed takeout from whatever trendy fusion restaurant Bella had ordered from the night before. I was sitting on the edge of the cot, cradling my right hand in my left. It was useless. My fingers were locked in a semi-curled position, the joints swollen to the size of walnuts, the skin shiny and hot to the touch. It was an acute flare-up, triggered by stress, cold, and 16-hour days of repetitive micro-movements. I couldn't hold a needle. I couldn't even hold a spoon. The door at the top of the stairs opened. David shuffled down carrying a styrofoam container. He looked tired. The bags under his eyes were dark purple. Living with a tyrant takes a toll on the henchman, too. Pad thai, he mumbled, setting the box on the workbench next to the pile of unfinished satin. It's cold, but it's still good. David, I said. My voice was a croak.
He looked at me, then quickly looked away. What? My hands, I said. I held them up. They were trembling violently. I can't work. The inflammation is too severe. Just soak them in warm water, he suggested weakly. That usually helps, right? I need my medication, I said. The diclofenac and the prednisone. The prescription ran out 3 days ago. You said you would pick up the refill. I did, he said defensively. I picked it up. It's in the kitchen. Bring it to me, please. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He rubbed the back of his neck. Bella has the pharmacy bag. She keeps the meds in the cabinet to keep them organized. David, I said, putting every ounce of fatherly authority I had left into my voice. Go upstairs, get the bottle, bring it to me. I am in agony. He looked at my hands. He saw the tears of pain welling in the corners of my eyes. For a second, I saw a flicker of the boy he used to be, the boy who used to bring me Band-Aids when I pricked my finger. Okay, he whispered. Okay, Dad, I'll get it. He turned and walked up the stairs. I waited. I closed my eyes and breathed through the throbbing in my wrists. Just hold on, I told myself. 10 minutes to relief.
5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then I heard voices. He's stalling, Bella. Look at his hands. He can't sew like that. He's manipulating you, David. He's an addict. Old people get hooked on these things. It's anti-inflammatory medication, Bella, not heroin. He's in pain. Pain is a state of mind. The door opened again. It wasn't David. Bella descended the stairs. She was wearing a silk kimono, one of the prototypes I had finished last week. It looked beautiful on her, which made me hate her even more. In her right hand, she held a translucent orange pharmacy bottle. The sound of the pills rattling inside was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Ch-ch-ch. You said you're on strike, she said, stopping at the bottom of the stairs. She leaned against the railing, looking casual, relaxed. I am not on strike. I am crippled. I need my medicine. She held the bottle up to the light, inspecting the label. Dr. Henderson, take 1 tablet twice daily with food. Warning, may cause drowsiness. She looked at me. Drowsiness isn't really on the schedule, Arthur. We have 14 days.
If I don't take them, I can't move my fingers. If I can't move my fingers, I can't sew. It's simple mechanics, Bella." She pursed her lips. She walked over to the workbench. She looked at the mannequin in the center of the room. It was draped in layers of white muslin, the mock-up for the finale dress, the phoenix. "The wedding dress," she said softly, running a hand over the rough cotton. "The showstopper, the piece that's going to get me on the cover of Vogue." She turned to me. Her eyes were hard. "It needs to be started in the real fabric, the silk charmeuse, today." "I can't cut the silk," I said. "My grip strength is gone. If I slip, I ruin the fabric. That silk costs $80 a yard." "So don't slip," she said. She shook the bottle again. Rattle, rattle. She did it rhythmically, like she was shaking a bag of treats for a disobedient puppy. "Here is the deal," she said. "I am not making a deal for my health," I snapped. "Give me the damn pills." "Tisk tisk, aggressive," she smirked. "Here is the deal. You cut the pattern for the phoenix today. You sew the bodice by tomorrow night. If the bodice is done and perfect, you get 2 pills. You're holding my medication hostage?" I stared at her in disbelief. That is monstrous." "It's project management," she corrected. "I need to ensure productivity. If I give you the whole bottle, you'll just pop them, get high, and fall asleep on my expensive fabric." "They are not narcotics," I shouted, my voice echoing off the cinder blocks. "They are for swelling. Same difference." She looked around the room. Her eyes landed on a high industrial shelf bracket mounted on the far wall. It was about 7 feet up, installed years ago for storage, accessible only by a ladder. Bella walked over to the shelf. She stood on her tiptoes. She was tall in her heels. She placed the orange bottle on the very edge of the shelf. "There," she said, dusting off her hands. "Safekeeping." "I can't reach that," I said. "You know I can't reach that. My shoulders." "Then you better get working," she said brightly. "David!" David appeared at the top of the stairs. He wouldn't look down. "Bring down the stepladder," Bella commanded. "Why?" "Because we are taking it upstairs. We need to change a bulb in the foyer." "But how will Dad—" "Arthur is resourceful," she said. "He's a master tailor, remember?" David came down. He grabbed the small folding stepladder that was leaning against the furnace. He looked at me. His face was pale. He knew this was wrong. He knew this was crossing a line from bad family dynamic to human rights violation. "David," I said, "don't." "I'm sorry," he mouthed. He took the ladder. Bella followed him to the stairs. She stopped at the door and looked back. I was sitting on the cot, a broken old man in a basement, staring up at a plastic bottle that contained the only relief from my torture. "Friday, Arthur," she said, "the bodice, or I flush them." The door slammed. The lock clicked. The deadbolt slid home. I sat there for a long time. The silence in the basement was heavy, pressing against my eardrums. I looked at the bottle. It was mocking me, a bright orange beacon of cruelty. Pain has a way of clarifying things. When you are comfortable, you can make excuses for people. You can say, "Oh, she's just stressed," or "he's just weak." But when every nerve ending in your body is firing a distress signal, and the people who are supposed to love you are the ones pressing the button, the excuses evaporate. I realized then that I had been holding on to a fantasy. I had been thinking of this as a family dispute. I had been thinking that if I just worked hard enough, if I just proved my value, they would remember who I was. They would remember the Sunday dinners, the birthday cards, the time I taught David to ride a bike. But those memories were dead. They were buried in the grave with Martha. The people upstairs were not my family. Bella was a parasite, a creature of pure appetite, consuming everything in her path, money, attention, people, to fill a void that could never be filled. And David? David was worse. He was the host that let the parasite in. He was a man who would watch his own father suffer rather than have an uncomfortable conversation. They were not family. They were captors. And I was not a grandfather. I was a prisoner of war. I looked at my hands again. The claws. I closed my eyes and focused on the pain. I didn't try to push it away anymore. I welcomed it. I let it fill me up. I let it turn into fuel. "You want the phoenix?" I thought. "I will give you the phoenix.
But a phoenix doesn't just rise. First, it has to burn.
I stood up. I walked to the wall. I couldn't reach the shelf. I couldn't climb, but I could knock. I picked up a heavy wooden yardstick, an old solid maple one with brass tips. I swung it. Whack! I hit the shelf. The bottle wobbled. Whack! It tipped. Whack! It fell. The bottle hit the concrete floor. The cap, which she hadn't screwed on tight, popped off. Pills scattered across the dirty gray floor like white confetti. I dropped to my knees. It was agony. My knees hit the cement and I let out a sharp cry. I crawled like an animal. I gathered the pills with my sweepings of my forearms, pulling them into a pile. I picked one up with my lips. I swallowed it dry, then another. I lay on the floor surrounded by the scattered pills, waiting for the medicine to hit my bloodstream. I looked at the white muslin of the dress form. I wasn't going to just sew the dress. I was going to weaponize it.
The plan I had formed in the dark was too kind. Simply ruining the show wasn't enough. Humiliation wasn't enough. They had taken my dignity. They had taken my home. Now they had tried to take my body. I dragged myself up. I sat at the machine. I waited for the chemicals to dampen the fire in my nerves. When the trembling finally stopped, about 40 minutes later, I reached under my cot. I pulled out the Danish cookie tin. I opened it. Inside sat the spool of black thread, the Houdini thread. But next to it, I had something else. A small vial of clear liquid, industrial solvent, the kind used to dissolve glue in shoe manufacturing. I looked at the solvent. I looked at the thread. And then, I looked at the pattern for the phoenix gown. The design called for a hidden support structure, a corset built inside the dress to hold everything up. If I used the thread on the visible seams, the dress would fall apart. But if I used the solvent to weaken the lining, the dress wouldn't just fall apart, it would disintegrate in layers. It would peel away like skin. I threaded the needle. Friday, I whispered. I started to sew, and for the first time in weeks, I was smiling.
The basement was quiet. Upstairs, the floorboards had stopped creaking hours ago. Bella and David were asleep, dreaming of the millions they thought they were about to make. I sat on the edge of my cot. My hands were steady now, thanks to the pills I had scavenged from the floor. The pain was a distant, dull roar rather than a sharp scream. I reached under the bed frame, past the dust bunnies and the cold concrete, until my fingers brushed against cold metal. I pulled out the Royal Dansk cookie tin. To anyone under the age of 40, this tin is invisible. It's domestic camouflage. It signifies buttons, safety pins, and useless odds and ends. Bella had kicked it aside 3 times while searching my room for contraband food. She never opened it. She assumed it was trash. She was wrong. It was an armory. I pried the lid off. It made a soft pop. Inside, nestled among unmatched buttons and rusted thimbles, was a single spool of thread wrapped in plastic. It wasn't ordinary thread. I held it up to the weak light of the desk lamp. The thread itself was white, a crisp, clean white that perfectly matched the silk charmeuse of the phoenix gown. But the label on the bottom was black with silver text.
Sulky Solvi. Extreme. Warning. Theatrical grade. Water and heat soluble. Do not iron. I hadn't bought this for a wedding dress. I had bought it in 1989 for a magician named the Great Danton at the Mirage in Las Vegas. He needed a tuxedo that would fall off him in 2 seconds flat for his metamorphosis act. I had engineered the seams to hold under normal tension but dissolve instantly when hit with a burst of steam, or in this case, intense, focused heat. Bella wanted 4,000 watts of lighting. She wanted to shine like the sun. I was about to give her Icarus wings. I took a standard spool of Gutermann heavy-duty polyester, the strongest stuff on the market. This was what Bella had ordered me to use. "Make it bulletproof, Arthur," she had said. I used my fingernail to carefully peel the sticker off the top of the Gutermann spool. 100% polyester, high tensile. I did the same to the black label on the soluble thread. I crumbled the black label into a tiny ball and swallowed it. No evidence. Then I pressed the Gutermann label onto the soluble spool. It fit perfectly. To the naked eye, to the touch, even to a light tug, it was identical to the high-strength thread. It was spun to mimic the texture of silk, but chemically, it was sugar glass.
I walked over to the sewing machine. I removed the bobbin case. I wound the soluble thread onto the bobbin. Whir, whir, whir. The sound was hypnotic. I threaded the top of the machine, up through the guide, down through the tension discs, up through the take-up lever, and down to the needle. I licked the end of the thread. I passed it through the eye of the needle. Click. I snapped the bobbin case back in. The trap was set. I looked at the pile of pristine white silk waiting on the cutting table. The phoenix. Bella wanted a dress that would change her life. I touched the machine's pedal lightly. The needle bobbed once, hungry. "Be careful what you wish for, darling," I whispered. I turned off the lamp. I sat in the dark waiting for the sun to rise. I had a wedding dress to sew.
I worked with the precision of a bomb maker. The phoenix gown was a complex architectural structure. It relied on a system of internal tensions. The heavy silk skirt pulled down. The fitted bodice pulled up. The two forces met at the waistline, held together by a series of critical anchor seams. If those seams failed, gravity would do the rest. I laid the pattern pieces out on the cutting table. The silk charmeuse was slippery like liquid pearl. I pinned it with my swollen fingers, moving slowly, deliberately. I started with the skirt. For the long vertical seams of the train and the hem, I used the standard Gutermann polyester. I double-stitched them. I back-tacked every end. I wanted the skirt to be heavy. I wanted it to be indestructible. I wanted it to be a dead weight that would drag the rest of the garment down to hell. Then I got to the bodice. I swapped the spool. I loaded the Houdini thread. I adjusted the stitch length to 2.5 millimeters, tight enough to look professional, loose enough to allow the heat to penetrate quickly. I sewed the side seams of the bodice. I sewed the dart intake. I sewed the zipper insertion tape. The thread went in smoothly. It lay flat against the white silk, invisible. I ran my thumb over the stitch line. It felt solid. Under room temperature conditions, it had a tensile strength similar to cotton. It would hold for a fitting. It would hold for a walk down a hallway.
But under the 4,000-watt array Bella had bragged about, under the baking heat of the stage lights, the chemical bonds in the polymer would begin to break down within 2 minutes. At 3 minutes, they would turn to dust. I finished the bodice. I attached it to the heavy skirt using the Houdini thread. This was the kill switch. The entire weight of 5 yards of heavy silk was now hanging from a thread designed to vanish. I pressed the seams flat with a tepid iron. I couldn't use steam. Steam would trigger the reaction early. Dry iron only, I muttered, for delicate materials. I put the dress on the mannequin. It was breathtaking. It shimmered in the dingy basement light, a ghost in the machine. It looked like purity. It looked like redemption. It was a lie. The heavy door at the top of the stairs creaked open. "Arthur!" Bella's voice, impatient. "The car is here. Is it done?" "It is finished," I said. She came down the stairs, her phone pressed to her ear. "Yeah, I'm grabbing it now. No, the hair and makeup team is meeting us at the venue. Okay, bye." She shoved the phone into her pocket. She walked around the mannequin. She scrutinized every inch. She was looking for a flaw, a puckered seam, a loose thread, a stain.
There was nothing. It was perfect. "The fit looks tight," she said, frowning at the waist. "It is designed to be skin tight," I said, "to support the bust." She reached out and grabbed the hem of the skirt, the part I had sewn with the industrial-strength polyester. She yanked it hard. The fabric went taut. The seams groaned but held fast. She yanked again, harder this time, testing the construction. If she had pulled the bodice, the game might have been over, but she pulled the skirt. "Solid," she grunted. She looked at me. There was no warmth in her eyes, only calculation. "Finally, you're useful," she sneered. I guess the pills worked. She stripped the dress off the mannequin, bunching the expensive silk in her arms like it was dirty laundry. She didn't care about the art. She cared about the asset. "Pack up the machine," she ordered. "David is taking you to the venue. I need you backstage for emergency repairs." "I am tired, Bella," I said. "I need food." She paused at the stairs. She looked at the dress in her arms, then at me. "Right. Payment." She reached into her oversized tote bag. She pulled out a cling-wrapped sandwich. It was half-eaten. Lipstick stained the bite mark on the crust. "Turkey and Swiss," she said. She didn't hand it to me.
She tossed it. It flew through the air and landed on the floor next to my foot. The plastic wrap split open. "Eat up, Pop Pop," she said. "We leave in 10. She ran up the stairs, the white dress trailing behind her like a cloud. I looked at the sandwich on the dirty concrete. I looked at the dust mites dancing in the beam of the fluorescent light. I didn't pick it up. I reached for my coat. I patted the pocket to ensure the empty spool of Houdini thread was gone, and the real Gutermann spool was back in the machine. "Quality control," I whispered. I wheeled myself to the door. I was hungry, yes, but I would feast tonight. The venue was called the Foundry. It was a cavernous, repurposed slaughterhouse in the Navy Yard. It smelled of ozone, hairspray, and the specific kind of desperation that comes with trying too hard to be cool. David wheeled me in through the loading dock. I was dressed in my own tuxedo, the one item Bella hadn't sold or ruined. I had brushed it myself. I had polished my own shoes. I refused to let their filth touch my dignity. "Park him there," Bella shouted over the thumping bass of the sound check. She pointed to a spot near the curtain, right next to a rack of fire extinguishers. "And fix his hair. He looks windblown. We need distinguished artisan, not nursing home escapee." David took out a pocket comb. He tried to smooth my hair. His hands were shaking so bad he poked me in the ear. "Stop it," I whispered. I took the comb from him and did it myself. "I'm sorry, Dad. Just get through tonight, please." I looked past him, through the gap in the heavy velvet curtains, out into the audience. The room was filling up. The air was hazy with artificial fog. The chairs were clear acrylic, uncomfortable and pretentious. And there, in the center of the front row, sat the executioner, Mr. Volkov. He looked out of place among the fashion editors in their oversized glasses and the influencers with their ring lights. He was wearing a black suit that cost more than this entire building. He sat perfectly still, his legs uncrossed, his hands resting on his knees. He wasn't looking at the program, he was looking at his watch. He checked it, he tapped the face. He looked like a man timing a demolition charge. "5 minutes to show," the stage manager screamed into a headset. Backstage was a war zone. Models were running around half naked, being spray painted with glitter. Stylists were steaming garments. Bella stood in the center of the chaos, wearing a silk robe, screaming at a girl who couldn't have been more than 16. "You look like a cow," Bella shrieked. "Suck it in. If I see a single roll of fat on that runway, you'll never work in this town again." The girl burst into tears. "Don't cry, you'll ruin the foundation." Bella turned away, disgusted. "David, get me my dress, now." David ran to the garment bag. He unzipped it with trembling fingers. The Phoenix. It glowed white in the dim backstage light. It looked innocent. Bella dropped her robe. She stood there in her industrial Spanx. "Careful with it," she snapped as David lifted the dress. "It's worth millions." She stepped into it. She shimmied the silk up her legs, over her hips. "Zip me." David pulled the zipper up. Zip! I watched the seam. I watched the thread. It held. The tension was high. Bella had insisted on a fit so tight it restricted her breathing, but the chemical bonds were stable at room temperature. She turned to the mirror. She smoothed the bodice. She turned left, then right. She admired herself. "God," she whispered, "I am a genius." She really believed it. She had erased me from the narrative completely. In her mind, she had birthed this creation. She saw me watching her in the mirror's reflection. She spun around. "Well," she demanded, "what do you think, Op-Pop? Is it a masterpiece or what?" I looked at the dress. I knew that in approximately 4 minutes the structural integrity of that bodice would drop to 0. "It is striking," I said. "The fit is very aggressive." "It's snatched," she corrected. "It shows off the assets." "Indeed," I smiled thinly. "You look exposed, my dear." She rolled her eyes. "You're just jealous because you never had a show this big. Savile Row is dusty, Arthur. This is the future." "Places," the stage manager yelled. "House lights going down." The music swelled, a deep, rhythmic techno beat that vibrated in my chest. Bella adjusted her straps. She checked her teeth for lipstick.
She looked at David. "Don't mess up the live stream. Keep the camera on me." She didn't look at me again. I was furniture. "Cue the lights," she commanded into the void. The heavy curtain parted. The blinding white glare of the halogen array flooded the runway. The heat hit us backstage like a physical wave. Bella stepped forward. She walked into the light. I sat back in my wheelchair. I folded my hands in my lap. The timer had started. The music crescendoed, a synthetic, grinding roar that shook the aluminum bleachers. It was the kind of noise designed to bypass the brain and vibrate directly in the chest cavity. I sat in my designated spot, tucked away in the shadows of the back row near the soundboard. David had parked me there moments before the show started, whispering a terrified apology before scurrying back to the safety of the wings. From my vantage point, I saw everything. The sea of phones held aloft like votive candles, the bored expressions of the editors, the twitchy anticipation of the investors. And Bella. She was halfway down the runway. She moved with a predator's grace, left foot, right foot, hips swinging to the beat. The phoenix gown flowed around her like a living thing. The white silk caught the light and scattered it, making her glow with an ethereal, almost radioactive aura. The heat in the room was stifling. The ventilation system in the old warehouse was woefully inadequate for the amount of equipment Bella had rented. The air smelled of ozone, burnt dust, and expensive perfume evaporating off overheating skin. But on the runway, it was a blast furnace.
Those lights, 4 arrays of 1,000-watt halogen theater spots, were focused on a strip of floor 4 feet wide and 40 feet long. I knew the specs. I had read the rental agreement on Bella's desk. These lights generated temperatures upwards of 100 degrees Fahrenheit at the focal point. Bella was walking through fire. I looked at my watch. 1 minute, 40 seconds elapsed. The Houdini thread was rated for 180 seconds of structural integrity under high heat before rapid polymer degradation began. She was cutting it close. She was walking too slowly, milking the moment, basking in the adoration she believed she deserved. "She looks incredible," a woman in front of me whispered. "Look at that silhouette. It's architectural." "It's a marvel," her companion agreed. I gripped the armrests of my wheelchair. Just wait, I thought. Wait for the architecture to fail. Bella reached the end of the runway, the pit. This was where the photographers were stacked 3 rows deep. This was where the money shot happened. She stopped. She planted her feet. She threw her head back. She placed her hands on her hips, putting maximum lateral tension on the side seams of the bodice. The lights were merciless. I could see the sheen of sweat on her collarbone. The heat was cooking the fabric. 1 minute, 55 seconds. The thread was invisible to the eye, but in my mind I could see the molecular bonds screaming. The polymer chains, designed to hold fast at room temperature, were now absorbing the thermal energy. They were softening, liquefying, turning from steel to soup. Bella smiled. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated arrogance. She looked at the front row. She looked directly at Mr. Volkov. She pivoted to her left to show off the back of the gown, the intricate train I had spent 3 sleepless nights perfecting. Twist. The torque on the bodice increased. Click, 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 click. The shutters went wild. And then physics collected its debt. Pop. It wasn't loud enough for the audience to hear over the music, but Bella heard it. I saw her eyes widen. The left shoulder strap, which was bearing the weight of the heavy silk train, simply detached. It didn't tear, it let go. The thread dissolved, and the fabric sprang away as if it had never been sewn. The strap slapped against her bare back. Bella froze. She reached a hand up, confused, trying to catch the falling strap. But the movement triggered the cascade. The bodice was constructed with a series of load-bearing seams. When one failed, the stress transferred instantly to the next. Zip. It sounded like a piece of paper being torn in half. The right side seam disintegrated. The Houdini thread turned to dust. The bodice, now unanchored, lost its grip on her torso. The heavy silk charmeuse, pulled down by the weight of the skirt and the train, obeyed gravity. It didn't slide down slowly, it fell. 1 second she was wearing a couture masterpiece. The next second, the dress was a puddle of white fabric around her ankles. The music seemed to stop, though the bass kept thumping.
The world narrowed down to the woman standing at the end of the runway. Bella Vane, the influencer, the icon. She was standing in a pair of industrial-strength flesh-colored Spanx that extended from her mid-thigh to just under her bust. They were tight, unflattering, and clinical, like a medical garment used for liposuction recovery.
On her chest, 2 large silicone nipple covers, crude circular pasties clung to her skin. She was exposed. Not in a sexy wardrobe malfunction way, in a grotesque, humiliating, the emperor has no clothes way. She stood there, arms still raised in her power pose, frozen in shock. She looked down at her body. She looked at the pile of silk on the floor. She looked at the dust where the seams used to be. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence in the warehouse, the kind of silence that precedes a bomb blast. Bella's mouth opened, a silent scream of confusion. She tried to cover herself with her hands, but there was too much to cover. The Spanx did nothing to hide the reality. Underneath the glamour, she was just a person, a frantic, sweaty, terrified person. Then, the first sound broke the silence. It wasn't a gasp. It was a shutter click. Then another. Then a machine gun volley of them. Flash, 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 flash. The photographers weren't looking away. They weren't being polite. They were predators, and they had just smelled blood. They zoomed in. They captured every inch of the disaster. The Spanx, the pasties, the terror in her eyes. "Oh my God," someone in the front row said. It wasn't a whisper anymore. Then the laughter started.
It began in the back, near the standing room section, the cynical bloggers and the interns. A sharp, barking laugh. Then it spread. It rolled forward like a wave. A cruel, hysterical, uncontrollable laughter. "Is this the look?" someone shouted. "Is this the deconstructed collection?" "Spanx by Bella," someone else jeered. Bella spun around, trying to run backstage, but her heels caught in the pile of silk around her ankles. She tripped. She went down hard, sprawling onto the runway in her underwear. The microphone she had been wearing for the live stream crunched against the floor, sending a piercing feedback screech through the speakers. Screech! The audience covered their ears, but they didn't stop laughing. She scrambled to her knees, clawing at the fabric, trying to pull it up, trying to hide. But the dress was in pieces. The panels had separated completely. She was holding scraps, rags. She looked out into the darkness of the room. She looked for David. She looked for me. Her eyes found mine in the shadows.
I didn't look away. I didn't rush to help. I slowly, deliberately brought my hands together. Clap, clap, clap. I applauded. She saw me. She saw the ghost of the grandfather she had tortured, and in that moment she knew. She looked at the white dust on the floor. She looked at the lights. She knew. She let out a wail, a primal, shattering sound of a life ending, and crawled on her hands and knees toward the exit, the cameras flashing mercilessly with every inch she moved. I looked toward the front row. Mr. Volkov was standing up. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't taking photos. He was buttoning his jacket. His face was a mask of cold, granite indifference. He signaled to his 2 associates. They turned and walked not toward the exit, but toward the backstage access door. The show was over. The collection was dead, and the debt was due.
The runway was a graveyard of white silk. Bella scrambled off the stage, her heels clicking frantically on the polished concrete. She was trying to hold up the tattered remains of the skirt to cover her chest, but the fabric was just scraps now. She looked like a shipwreck survivor washing up on a hostile shore. "David!" she screamed, her voice cracking into a sob. "Cut the feed! Kill the lights!" But the lights didn't die. The operator was either too shocked to move or, like everyone else, too mesmerized by the disaster to look away. I sat in the shadows, my hands resting calmly on my wheels. The applause I had started had died down, replaced by a low, buzzing murmur of confusion and delight. The fashion world loves a rising star, but they love a falling star even more. They would feast on this carcass for months. I turned my gaze to the front row. While the rest of the room was tweeting, laughing, or gasping, one man was moving with terrifying purpose. Mr. Volkov stood up. He didn't smooth his suit. He didn't look at the stage where Bella had just immolated her career. He looked at his watch. He brought his phone to his ear. He didn't shout. In the sudden lull of the music, I could hear his voice. It was deep, flat, and final. "The product is defective," he said. "The deal is void." He listened for a second. "Yes, proceed with liquidation. Secure the collateral. Immediate extraction." He hung up. He buttoned his jacket. He signaled to his two associates, thick-necked men who looked like they chewed gravel for breakfast. They didn't head for the exit. They headed for the backstage door. The door Bella had just run through. Volkov turned. His eyes swept the room and landed, for a brief second, on me.
He nodded, a single, almost imperceptible dip of his chin. Professional courtesy. One shark acknowledging another. Then he walked out the side exit, disappearing into the Brooklyn night. I spun my wheelchair around. I rolled toward the wings. David was standing by the monitor bank. He was pale, his skin the color of old paper. He was staring at the screen, which was still showing the replay of the dress disintegrating. "Dad," he whispered when he saw me. He looked like he was going to vomit. What happened? The silk, it just fell apart." I stopped my chair next to him. I reached into my tuxedo pocket. I pulled out the empty wooden spool, the one I had stripped the Houdini label from. I held it up to his face. "It wasn't the silk, David," I said softly. "It was the connection." He looked at the spool, then at me. His eyes widened as the realization hit him. The senile old man. The prop. "You?" he stammered. "You did this? But why? You ruined us. You ruined everything." "I didn't ruin anything," I said softly. "I just hastened the inevitable. You were already ruined, son. You just didn't know it yet." "Bella," he choked out. Volkov is going to... Volkov is a businessman. He expects a return on his investment. Bella promised him a show. She failed. Now she has to work off the debt." I leaned in close. "You chose your side, David. You chose the parasite over the host. You let her starve me. You let her lock me in a basement. You put your own father in a sweatshop." David slumped against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor. He put his head in his hands. "I'm sorry," he wept. "Dad, I'm so sorry." "I know, but apologies don't pay bills." I tossed the empty spool into his lap. It bounced off his knee and rolled away. "Quality control, son. Always check the materials." I didn't look back. I rolled myself toward the fire exit. The heavy steel bar pushed open with a clang. Outside, the air was freezing. It was a cold, sharp New York winter night. It felt cleaner than the air inside. I didn't go to the family car. I didn't wait for David. I rolled to the curb and hailed a yellow taxi. The driver, a Sikh man with a kind face, jumped out to help me with the chair. "Where to, boss?" he asked. "The airport motel, the one near JFK, and stop at a liquor store on the way." 3 days later. The motel room smells like lemon pledge and stale cigarettes, but the sheets are clean, and the door has a chain lock that I control. I'm sitting in the armchair, feet up on the ottoman. I have a cold Heineken in my hand, the expensive import kind, not the swill David used to buy. They thought I was broke. They thought the pension was all I had. They forgot that I ran a cash business on Savile Row for 30 years. I have an account in the Cayman Islands that I haven't touched since 1995. It's not millions, but it's enough. Enough to buy a small condo in Florida. Enough to hire a nurse who actually cooks. The TV is on. It's the local news. Social media star Bella Vane is facing a class action lawsuit from investors after the disastrous Phoenix show last Friday, the anchor says. The screen shows the clip, the pixelated blur of Bella standing in her Spanx. It plays on a loop. "Vane has not been seen since the event," the reporter continues.
Neighbors say the house in Westchester has been vacated. Foreclosure proceedings have begun. I take a sip of beer.
David called me yesterday. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. He was crying. He said the house is gone. He said Bella went away with Mr. Volkoff's associates to work out a payment plan. He said he's sleeping in his car. He asked if he could come stay with me. I deleted the message. I look at the screen. They are showing a photo of Bella from happier times, posing with a duck face. I think about Volkoff. I think about the collateral. I hear Volkoff runs a very specific kind of manufacturing operation in Eastern Europe, underground, very secure. They say he has a basement. I hope it's damp. I hope the ventilation is poor. And I hope for Bella's sake she learns how to sew, because where she's going, the shifts are long and the breaks are non-existent. I finish my beer and crush the can. Family is blug, but dignity? Dignity is gold, and I just cashed out.